Okay, where did we leave off now? That's right. We were talking about when you were 10 years old and you were in the Hitler Youth. Now, you were in Czechoslovakia. You had to leave Czechoslovakia at a certain point. So do you want to pick the story up there?
Okay. So when I was about 10 years old, I joined, and that was already towards the end of the war. So there was a great deal of bombing going on. In 43, 44, there was, especially in 44, there was a tremendous amount of bombing of Brünn going on. The mainly Americans, but also quite a few Russians would come and bomb Brünn. And so the bombing continued until one day we were told that the Russian front was coming very close. We would be spending day and night in the bunkers already.
The air raid shelters.
In the air raid shelters. And one day people would come into the air raid shelters and said that the Russian front is about a few hours away, and that we knew what that meant. That meant that the women were going to be raped, and that it was just going to be terrible. And so the idea was to skedaddle as fast as possible. And that meant, and then we were told that we should hop into the trains. There would be some trains. We didn't live that terribly far away from the train station, and then we should leave. And so we didn't even have time to go upstairs into our apartment anymore. Right from the air raid shelters into the trains and off. And that.
So you lost everything you had.
Absolutely everything.
Now you have. I remember you describing having vivid recollections of the bombings. I remember you talking about being in the bunkers and hearing bombs go off that rattled the doors.
That's what happened in school. I was in school.
This was in Brünn too.
That was in Brünn. Yeah.
Why were the Allies so interested in bombing Brünn? Was there some kind of plan?
There was a great deal of
munitions
factories.
Munitions
okay, so you lived. Okay, and at this time your mother wasn't involved with any men.
No.
Or okay.
No men. I lived with my mother. My father and my brother were already soldiers, and I went to school, and the school was unheated, and we only had sparingly school. We basically only went to school to get homework, and then we had to do the work at home, and there was not much instruction.
Because of the war?
Yes, because it was already the end of the war. That was when things started to get really difficult. And so one day I was in school, and then there was alarm, and we all had to file down into the cellar, and we were all sort of silly kids. And we
10 or 11 years old?
10, 11 years old, and we were just kidding around and playing games and being silly, and suddenly there was just one big whap! There was a big iron door that just went swap against like this, and we were all very quiet. And the school had been hit. So we were down in the cellar.
So the school had a bunker. You were all in the bunker. You'd filed down in the bunker, and the school took a direct hit.
Yes, yeah. The school had been hit. And so when we came out of the cellar, we looked at this. Everything was destroyed, and there were houses burning all over, and everything sort of was sort of dilapidated. Everything was in the street. The houses all fell into the streets. Obviously, there was and wires were hanging down. And I just had one thought: it was my mother. And my mother, on her side of the city, had only one thought: where is Mimilein? That was my name. So my mother was looking for Mimilein, climbing over all the rubbles, and I was looking for my mother and climbing over the rubbles, and we never met because we were looking for each other in the burning city.
So when did you finally meet again?
Well, a few hours later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's what it was like in the last weeks and months in Brünn. And then we hopped in the train, as I said before. The train was crowded with people, and when the train stopped at the station, my mother was saying, well, my parents, same thing again. And luckily, both my grandparents were on the same train. So that was wonderful. They were on the same train. They were in a different wagon, but they were on the same
And so
train.
everybody fled to Munich?
No. Oh, no.
Who would have liked to?
Oh, no. That was in the last days of the war. So that was in May. We left on April 18th in 1945. I happen to know this date. And we were on the road for 7 days. And there was always...
strafing.
Strafing. There were
The
always...
locomotive was always strafed.
They were strafing the locomotive, or they were strafing the passenger? They left the passenger cars alone.
They America, they didn't get any of the passengers, but they kept on knocking out the locomotives. Always had, the train was always, spent a week. Spent a week to cover. Strafing attacks.
It took a week to
It
cover.
took a week to cover a distance that takes
No
2
line.
hours. 2 hours by car to now. It took them a week to cover that distance because their locomotive kept on getting knocked out.
Oh, it was terrible, and then all the
Apparently they
windows
were
were knocked
only
out.
going for the locomotives.
Now, who was shooting at them? The Germans or the
No, American,
Russian.
Russian.
I think.
Russians? Because the
Well, maybe
Russians were the
Russian.
ones who were trying to keep everybody from fleeing.
We were so close to the Russian front, these must have been Russians.
Okay.
I
You
don't
didn't
think
know?
these
Did
were
you see the airplanes?
No.
Okay.
Yes, we saw them, but we didn't know which ones they were, really.
And you could hear the locomotive
They
getting
were
hit?
very low, they came very low. And
So-
they were shooting with machine guns.
So you remember that?
Strafing.
You remember the airplane shooting at the train you were on?
Oh, yeah, of course. And
Were-
then all the
was
windows...
that must have been terrifying.
They were probably
No,
used
in
to it
those
by
in
then.
those days, when you were a child, you just perceive things in a different way. I thought it was just very exciting and it was just high adventure. I don't remember, well, that time when the school was hit. We were sort of very pale and quiet. But all the other things I just thought were just kind of great. No school, no more teachers, dirty looks type of thing. I enjoyed it. My poor mother, of course, didn't. She
Just lost everything she owned.
she just
She
lost
understood-
everything.
she
You know,
understood
was
the
alone
gravity
with
of the
that awful
situation.
kid, which was myself. She was alone with that awful kid. Nobody helping, protecting, or giving her any kind of anything.
All the women were, the men were all gone.
Yeah,
women were
and she
bad
had to
spot.
take care of her own parents and of me, and she was not well herself because when the strikers came, they knocked out all the windows, and it was April and it was cold. It was just very, very cold this whole week.
What
day
knocked
and
out the windows? I mean,
Machine gun fire.
well, I can't
And they
imagine bullets knocking out the windows.
Well,
It must have
no
been.
more windows in this train. I don't know why, but
It must have been just
Impact.
the impact of explosions, of
Right.
nearby explosions. If they were shooting out the windows, they were killing civilians. I mean,
Well,
Machine-
some
aircraft
people did
bullets.
get wounded.
Don't know how to explain it.
people were getting hurt on the train then.
Some people did get wounded. Yes.
Wounded, but nobody got killed, to your
Not
knowledge.
that I know. No,
Okay,
And
and
they
that was
didn't-
mostly glass shards and things like that.
yeah.
They must have been taking a great deal of care not to hurt any civilians, because if
Must have been. Otherwise, they would have wiped out the
they
whole
could have
train
wiped out
with-
the whole train with
absolute
airstrikes.
ease. All you have to do is
Right.
fly alongside.
Well, the worst thing that I
Right,
remember
right.
was just the cold. That was the very worst. It was ice cold in the night because we didn't have windows in this train. And we
Okay,
didn't have
so
any
and
blankets.
where was the death? Where were you headed?
Away,
Towards Germany.
no, we were headed towards Bohemia.
So you got to Bohemia,
We were
and
trying
that's
to-
where the camp was, right? You told him.
The camp then was in Bohemia, yes.
Well, they got that far, and then the war was over, and then there was no.
Well,
going
not
anywhere.
right away. We were first distributed over the country side in Bohemia. We were distributed on farmyards. We stayed in the straw of some, and then we were still fed by the I don't know, some Nazi organization, some kind of something.
Now the Czechs from Brünn didn't have to flee.
No, they didn't.
It was just the German-speaking
Absolutely.
population in Brünn that had to get out of Dodge.
Right.
Okay. What if now?
So
Okay.
then after another week or so, the war was over. That's when the Russians and the Americans joined in Czechoslovakia. So we were right there where Patton was. Okay,
Right.
we were sort of on the side of Patton.
You said the first Americans you saw were black
They
tankers.
sure were.
And you remember seeing your first? Did you see American soldiers first or Russian soldiers first after the capitulation?
Americans first.
Mhm.
When we were told the war is over, we were told to leave this teensy little village that was about I don't know, very small.
This is after the train ride.
Yes.
You took the train to Bohemia, hid out in some farms,
Yes,
stayed on the farms for a couple of weeks,
just a week or maybe 2 weeks. Yes.
and then word came down that the war was over.
No, look, we fled on April 18th, and the war was over on May 4th.
Right. So a few weeks later, you're told the war's over.
Yes.
And where did you then see American tankers?
We were told to go and report to a certain place. That was this factory that we saw last year.
Yeah.
We had to go to a place where all these people like ourselves, Germans that were spreading all over, hiding all over, had to report. And so we had to walk over there. That was a day's walk. We had hardly any luggage. And so we had to report there. And in this place, that was called Horaždovice, that is in southern Bohemia, close to Pilsen, where they make the good beer, close to there. The Americans, that was Patton's troops. The Americans started moving in, and we were sort of watching them roll in. There were a few tanks coming. It was just a small place.
So was it the Americans that took that part of the German population into custody?
Yes, at first.
And it was
first the Americans came, and it was a black division, apparently.
Well, a black outfit.
Or at least it was a black outfit.
And what do you remember about the black outfit in their tanks?
Well, I remember that my mother and I were standing in this marketplace, and we said, now the enemy is coming. The enemy, okay? Because obviously we didn't think that the Americans are going to be friendly to us. We had been thinking that, you know, they were the ones that bombed us all this time. So the enemy was coming. And so there came the enemy. Those tanks rolling into the marketplace, and the enemy stopped. There were about 3 tanks. And we said, now what? And then we opened up the things, and out came some black people. We're just absolutely petrified. I was 12, okay, but my mother was an adult, but she didn't enjoy it either. So they came out, and they just very casual. They just did what they had to do, and they told us to.
Your mother at the time was still a very attractive woman, holding her 12-year-old daughter by the hand.
Yes.
And they didn't assault your mother.
The Americans didn't at all.
The Americans did not assault the women.
No, the Americans never did.
Okay.
The Russians always did. The Americans almost never did.
Interesting. So these black soldiers were very, very disciplined.
Absolutely.
And very.
Absolutely, they were very kind. They liked children. They gave the children chewing gum and all kinds of good things.
And they didn't encounter. They weren't encountering any armed resistance though either, were they?
That was over. It was over that time.
So
By
okay.
that time, and we went to this camp.
They had probably already gone through that. And
Oh yeah, they had been through it.
so they were okay. Interesting.
At any rate, we came to this camp, and the Americans supervised it. It was under American supervision or whatever, but it was run by the Czechs, and the Czechs were hateful to the Germans because they had been suppressed all this time. So now the
Tables were turned.
Tables were
on the other
turned,
foot now.
and so they were absolutely.
Well, they were delighted to be able. They were delighted that they had you all in one place and they were getting ready to ship you all out.
They didn't know what to do with us at first, but they knew that they were not going to be very nice to us, and so there was no food. And then they started to be really nasty. Like there were about 2,000 people in this one place. It was a factory. It was an airplane factory, but it had been emptied out. It was just empty walls, and this is where we are, just like herrings, one after another, just like this. No food, and no toilets for 2,000 people. So they had to make latrines where people would have to sit like this. And there was, especially what was particularly mean was that they turned off the water. They would let the water run for 1 hour a day.
How long?
And by now it was May, and by now it suddenly became hot. It was first very cold when we left. I remember that.
Okay, when we left off, they were rationing water. They only had the water running 1 hour a day.
Yes, that was terrible because it was hot by now. Suddenly it turned hot. And so there I became sick. I had dysentery. And I remember very little about the rest of the time.
So
I just had a very high fever.
Your mother almost lost you at that point.
Yes, I almost didn't make it.
How long were you there?
We were there for about 2 months.
Oh.
And into the 3rd or 4th week, I got dysentery, and I just remember that I always had to go to this latrine there. There was no toilet.
So your mother almost lost you at that point.
Yeah, my mother, she was not a very practical woman, I must say, same as I'm also not very practical. We're just not very practical people. But she, at this point, she volunteered. It was hay harvest. Right, May, at the end of May, beginning of June, it was hay harvest. And then she volunteered to go to the farmers and work at the farm to help at the hay harvest. She had never seen a farm thing in her life.
Or implement,
Never once. She just didn't know how to hold a but she did this. And then she asked the farmers for some tea that she could bring to me. And she was given some tea, and this is how I survived. At any rate, I survived it.
Well, that's
There
very
was
practical.
no medication.
No American medicine rush to you there. No nothing.
No medication, nothing.
Were people dying around you?
Yes, like flies.
Do you remember seeing dead people?
No,
Well, how do you remember that?
because I was told.
This person died, that person died, then they'd be carried out. But it wasn't. It
I
wasn't
remember,
messy,
I had such a high fever.
and you were sick.
I was just
Okay.
lying
You were
there
sick
with a
yourself.
high fever, and I didn't know.
But you survived. That's amazing.
Yeah, that
Now,
was amazing.
after staying there for that
But I
period of time,
survived because my mother got the tea.
well,
Otherwise I would have.
there's no telling. That might have been keeping you sick longer. But
No. When you have dysentery, you have to have tea
oh,
because of the humidity.
mhm.
Your body would dehydrate.
Otherwise, I would have dehydrated.
Okay. But where did you go after the
Then,
camp?
yeah, it was this camp was shifted back and forth from the Americans to the Russians, back to the Americans to the Russians, because we were right at the place where the two armies joined.
Right.
And so, at first it was the Americans, right, these black guys, and it was Patton. And then it was the Russians again, and then it was the Americans again, and it was the Russians again, and then it was the Americans, and the Americans put us on lorries and shipped us out into Germany. And then we came to München.
So that's how you came to Munich.
Two and
This is how
a half ton trucks.
Now,
This
let me
is how
ask you.
it
So you came to Munich in an American
Lorry.
2.5 ton
Deuce.
truck.
The American deuce and a half. Yeah.
Well, it was, yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And by this time, Poldy had already been all the way to Stalingrad and back.
No, he hadn't been to Stalingrad.
No.
He was not in
He was
Stalingrad.
taken prisoner in Austria.
He was taken prisoner in Austria.
Oh, he didn't go into Russia.
No, they were going to ship him into Russia, but he fled.
Aha.
We didn't know where Poldy was at this point. We didn't know where Poldy
Now,
was.
had Poldy been living with you and your mother, or did he go with his father after the divorce?
He had theoretically been living with me and my mother, but since he was so much older, he first had to join the Arbeitsdienst and then he joined the army.
So he was basically, by the time the war started, Poldy was basically already an adult.
Not really.
A young adult.
He turned 17 in 1943 or 44. 44, he turned 17, and so then he joined.
So he was a young teenage boy living with you and your mother.
Yeah,
And then he joined the military and he went off.
Yeah.
right.
So your mother was, so when he came back and found the house in rubble, the house that he found in rubble was the house in Brünn.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's right. At any rate, then we had to live in camps.
In
And-
Munich?
In Munich.
In Munich, well, outside of Munich, in Allach. And we had to live in camps, and that was also a very, very difficult period because there was, again, no food, nothing for a long time. Until about 48. And then
Must have been some food, much of that otherwise it wouldn't be
Oh,
here.
yeah, but very,
Very
little,
yeah.
very little and
Right.
very bad food. Until 48. So there were 3 very difficult years.
And you started going to the gymnasium, the Louis
No,
Gymnasium?
no, not right away. At first I went to practically no school in Brünn because there was always a bombing going on. And then for 1945 I didn't go to school at all because there just wasn't any. And in 46 I started going to the local Volksschule there because there was just nothing else to do. And then finally, in about 48 I went to the Louis Schule.
So from 48 to when?
After 48 I just had very little schooling.
And then from 48 to when you got your Abitur at the Louis Gymnasium?
No. My mother died in the meantime.
Ah. And
And
who
my
took
mother-
care of you then?
Well, then I went to stay with my father.
Ah.
Yeah.
Then I went to Vienna.
So you went to Vienna, so you actually got your Abitur in Vienna.
Yes.
How old were you when your mother died now?
17.
Oh, very hard.
That was my
So your mother died. She hadn't been involved with any men. She died in
There
her.
was one time in Germany then
In Allah.
in Allach, a man by the name of Herr Wagner,
Uh-huh.
and he for some reason or other, he had not lost anything. Some people lost everything, and some people lost nothing. And so he had lost nothing. And he was still in possession of all his, I don't know, his house, his furniture, his clothes. And so
He was Bavarian.
See, yeah, must have been, yeah.
So he really helped see you and your mother through. Listen, we've
No,
got...
he didn't. He didn't, because I was so awful to him. I chased him away.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Now, okay, so then you went to stay with your father in Vienna, got your
my
Abitur.
Couldn't stand it in Vienna.
You didn't get along with your father. You were
No,
unhappy
not
with
at
your
all.
father.
I couldn't stand him. And then, as soon as I got my Abitur, I went to England. I studied in England for a year and a half. And when I finished England, I went back to München and started studying there. And then I was in München at the university, and I studied all sorts of things, and I knew all kinds of people.
So you just basically decided you liked school and
Yes.
stayed in it as long as you can. How were things for you in England?
I worked and studied. I got this degree from Cambridge.
And did you date while you were in England?
Yes.
Interesting.
I had a boyfriend.
So you had a British boyfriend.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
By the name of Sydney.
Sydney in Britain.
Sydney Celebrate, his name.
And he dated a... That's interesting. Okay. And so that you spent a year and a half in England.
Yes.
And did you like... Where were you in England? In London?
No, I was between Liverpool and Southport.
And you were... How did you get that? Was that an exchange program?
Yes.
And this was in the early 1950s.
Taking care of a horrible little child by the name of Angela.
And this was in the early 1950s.
Yes.
Right.
And you were on a student exchange program. So the British and the Germans were already getting along well enough.
England and Austria,
Right.
I
Okay.
was Austrian by then, yeah. I've always been Austrian and German and everything. But basically I'm Austrian.
Hmm. And so, okay, that's okay.
Mommy became German in 1938 because she was German speaking, and the Nazis came to grab.
Grabbed Austria.
Right.
Grabbed Austria in 38 and didn't grab Czechoslovakia until 39.
Well, I don't want to delve into that too deeply. What I want to get into now is you come back from England after. What did you study in England, by the way?
English.
English. Okay. English literature, that type thing. So you come back to Munich, and when did you start studying in Munich?
When? Right away.
Yeah, but what did you start studying?
Oh, German literature and
Theater.
theater, drama.
German literature and drama, and that must have been right around the time when you met Daddy. By now it's...
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So you got your degree before you met Daddy, right?
No. I went to school forever.
Oh, you were a permanent student.
My mother died in 50, and I got my Abitur in 52, and then I went to England, so I started studying in 54, and 54, 55.
I got out of the army. I'm so 57. No. 58, right? 58.
I don't know.
Well, Daddy, you had a tour of duty. You had a tour of duty in Germany, right?
Yeah.
You belonged to. You had been studying at Fordham, right?
Yeah.
And then you got drafted. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you got drafted out of Fordham?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got 4 minutes left on this tape. I think we ought to go ahead and let Mommy finish telling.
We're finished with you now. Huh?
No. Let's wrap it up and get to where you met Daddy, and then.
Well, he had the reputation of being sort of somebody who hated women.
A misogynist.
Yes, who hated women.
Where did you meet Daddy? In Munich.
In the Mensa.
In Munich.
Yes.
At the Mensa.
At the Mensa.
In the student restaurant.
Was that where it is today on Leopoldstrasse?
No, it was in Veterinärstrasse.
It was in the Veterinärstrasse.
Uh-huh. And you guys had a common circle of friends?
Yes.
And by this time you were...
The Hase was a philosopher, and I met him. And the Hase knew Mommy. And I noticed that the Hase had a great difficulty with women. Now, I wasn't really a misogynist, but I thought that he needed a dose of misogyny. And so I started trying to make him a little bit misogynist on the side, so to have something to compensate, to balance his automatic attraction to anything that was feminine. And so then he started telling Maria that he had met this misogynist American.
Which aroused your interests immensely.
No, she thought that I must be the most horrible person in the world. And against that expectation, the kind of expectations that she had, anybody would have looked terrific.
Anyway, we've got 3 minutes left. So you by the time you met Daddy, what had happened since 1953? You got what year did you meet?
Well,
59 maybe.
No, 58. 58.
58. You guys met in 58.
Yeah, I got out of the army in 58.
And you didn't marry until you dated how long before you married?
Well, we didn't start dating. I mean, we just met.
Oh, okay. So you met and you had a common circle of friends.
Yeah.
And by this time it was 1958 when you met. So
Yeah.
you're back from England and you must have spent a long time just
I guess
studying
it
in
was-
Munich.
Well,
Being a student.
From 54 to
54
To 58.
55 to 58.
You spent
And
4
I
years
met-
as you spent 4 years as a young student living in Munich.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was.
And
Yeah.
okay, and I guess you had other dates and everything.
I
And
lived with Alex.
interesting.
I lived with Alex, and then after I didn't live with Alex anymore, I lived with the Gräfin. And then no, before I lived with Gräfin, I lived in Kaulbachstraße in the Studentenheim,
Right.
Kaulbachstraße.
Right.
That's where my dad.
Right, she was living in the college.
I was in Kaulbachstraße.
Right around the corner from
At any rate, he was carrying on. He was going to all kinds of. I wasn't Irish, and then I wasn't this, and I was that.
I
and
was
just-
damned if I was going to marry a
I
German.
was just all the way wrong.
Is this when you were dating? You were saying things
We
like
did.
that.
No, we didn't
Date.
date. We didn't date. We didn't.
Oh, so things were said in jest. Things.
Well, no.
He was just
I really
difficult.
was
He-
resolved
he has
not to
always-
marry. I mean, I was getting kind of advanced in years. I was 28 years old, and knew I was going to get married someday. And I thought to myself, everybody in my family is probably thinking that I'm going to end up marrying a German. And I said, like hell, I'm never going to marry a German. And
She had to be Irish Catholic.
yes,
Well, that was the first thing Daddy asked me when I announced I was married. It was the phone rang over there on the Ohmstrasse, and Daddy picked it up, and I said, "Daddy, I got married." There was a shocked silence for a moment. And there's a little pause, and then Daddy said, "Is she Catholic?" I said, "Daddy, could you hold a minute?" Put my hand over the phone, called Amy. "Amy, what religion are you?" Shot came back. "I don't know. I don't think so." So we took it from there. Kind of like those Austrians.
Yeah. At any rate, I was wrong for the most part. Yeah.
Well, we're down to 1 minute, so we've reached that
Well,
point.
you
I think
notice-
we need to expand on that from now. We'll take your story and your relatives and on the Irish side, and we'll go into
Well, that's
we'll
going
go
to take
we'll
five
bring the whole
tapes.
thing back in here, and it's gonna require 3 tapes, but that's fine.
Do
Okay.
you have another
We're
tape?
not going to be able to
Sure.
make it in one
Oh, I
tape.
didn't know you had.
No, I don't have another tape here, but we'll get one.
not very easily.
They're, I mean, they're.
You just have to be precise and concise. We can see to that.